Hey everybody, welcome back to Kayfabe Critique. I'm David.
I'm Jason. What's up, y'all?
And tonight, the 20th anniversary is our episode, Survivor Series 1998.
Just bring it.
So we're talking about Survivor Series 1998, the heart of the Attitude Era. So Survivor Series 98, titled Deadly Game, coming from St. Louis here in Missouri. And it was the 12th annual Survivor Series, but interesting, it was the first one to not have a traditional Survivor Series match.
Yep, and it worked, and it's also, I don't know if you have this down, but when you think of Survivor Series, my mind automatically goes to 97, which we've already covered.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first Survivor Series since then, so you're wondering, okay, what are they going to do this year?
Right, so yeah, you had the famous Montreal Screwjob the year before, and in this one you're set up with the longest up to that point in the history of the company without a world champion.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, I think, the first time they hadn't had a world champion since 88 when they had the two Hebners angle, which was I still remember watching that, and I was like, there really are two of them.
Yeah, which exactly. So this show consisted of 14 matches. Ironically, and this was a 14-man tournament. The only other time the title went vacant led to another 14-man tournament at WrestleMania 4. Both of those, so in this situation, two individuals had buys in the first round. WrestleMania 4, because the two individuals involved in the match that declared the title vacant, Hogan and Andre, got buys. So we'd see a similarity to that in this show.
Right.
And so, aside from the tournament, we also had the WWE Women's Championship was on the line, and also a triple threat tag team match was on the line in this show.
And I'm sure we'll go into more detail on all of those. I watched this show, I watched this show for the first time all the way through a couple weeks ago, and I was hooked. I was just hooked. I mean, everything in it, I just wanted to see, because it was, like you said, it's the peak of the Attitude Era, and it was just so well done.
Yeah, and so and I remember watching it live at the time, and I remember discussing with my friends leading up to it, and there were just so many storylines going on, just multi-layered storylines, that what made the Attitude Era special. And we've heard, Bruce Pritchard say that, this was all Vince Russo, and, we've heard, Shawn Michaels talk about how Russo could weave storylines in and out, and this pay-per-view is a key example of his strengths as a head writer.
Yeah, and I was listening to him and Matt Coon today, and they were talking about how Vince, when he was in TNA, did an analysis of what people were watching when they would watch TNA shows, and people were more interested in the stories, like vignettes and stuff like that. Not so much the matches. Don't get me wrong, the matches on this show are great, but just the stories that lead into it, a lot of times they were more interesting in the match, because they mess with your head.
Yeah, and the characters were so well developed and so cared about that you were hooked in to see what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And Monday Night Raw at this time was must-see TV, because it was that way. You were on the edge of every story.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was involved in a story, so you had multiple characters to care about, multiple things to follow, multiple things that you were just left wondering what's going to happen next.
Exactly.
And this was set up well. This starts, you can go back to the fall of 1997 as we're building up towards this. So fall of 1997, Austin's injured. He can't wrestle. He got injured at SummerSlam 97 against Owen Hart. But we're seeing him come out as the anti-authority during this time, stunning Sergeant Slaughter, stunning the announcers, and eventually stuns Mr. McMahon.
Right.
Now we see that go on to, as you mentioned earlier, Survivor Series 1997. We see the Montreal Screwjob. This leads to the famous Brett Screwed Brett speech, but it's the start of creating the Mr. McMahon character. Leading up to WrestleMania 14, Austin wins the Royal Rumble. He's already had, as we mentioned in our previous episode tonight, the moment with Mike Tyson. Austin pushes him, McMahon saying, "You ruined it," to Austin. Austin's #1 contender for WrestleMania 14, and McMahon states he doesn't want Austin to become the champion.
Right, and I watched that clip, and Stone Cold asks Vince McMahon, "If you want Stone Cold to be the world champion, give me a hell yeah." The crowd says hell yeah, but Vince won't say it.
Yeah, and then when Kevin Kelly interviews him, and McMahon hits him with the "oh hell no."
Right.
And so Austin becomes champ, and Vince is trying to take the title off of him. He starts with Dude Love. Eventually, by King of the Ring, he's turning to Kane, and then Undertaker as we're leading into SummerSlam 98, and this continues to build to September of 98 at Breakdown, where we have the triple threat match of Austin, Taker, and Kane. Kane and Taker both pin Austin at the same time. Titles on the line, or up for grabs. McMahon's going to announce who the champion is. Austin drives the Zamboni to the ring. All hell breaks loose. So we find out we're going into Judgment Day with Kane versus Taker. Austin as a referee. Austin counts them both out. Austin makes sure that they don't win. Declares, I believe he announces himself as the champion.
He did.
Yeah, announces himself as the winner of the match. The next night on Raw, he holds McMahon hostage with a Bang 316 gun. But it's announced that he's hired back by Shane McMahon.
Yep.
Where Shane and Vince have had a falling out at this time. Vince kicks Shane basically out of the corporate role, puts him down to a lowly referee. And while this is all going on, we're seeing another storyline developing, and it's the people's champion, The Rock. And Miss McMahon says because he has a problem with the people, he has a problem with the people's champion. And while he's trying to screw The Rock out of his #1 contender spot, he eliminates him out of that. He's trying to keep him out of Survivor Series tournament. Shane McMahon hits the ring to help The Rock advance into the Survivor Series tournament.
Yep.
And yet there's another layer to this story as Mankind becomes the corporate favorite. McMahon refers to him kind of as another son and awards him the hardcore title.
Yeah, and I just listened to the episode where they talked about the hardcore title and just how that belt got made up and stuff like that. I mean, again, just so many storylines, just all just interwoven together, just like a thread just going through. And I mean, the storytelling was just so well done during this time.
And at this time, when I think of wrestling, like in terms of the popularity of WWE superstars, there's Hulk Hogan,
Right.
and then there's Stone Cold.
Right.
And it can be argued that Stone Cold may have even eclipsed Hogan during this time.
And yeah.
Yeah. And then you have another layer under that, which in that layer, there's only certain people that have ever reached that layer. Your Randy Savage. Your Rock.
Right.
And so, when you look at that, you have this building into the tournament. You have Austin. You have The Rock. All going at it at this time. So it's like you had some huge stars. Mankind was on the rise. Taker was a huge star at the time. Kane was being used well at the time. So it's like this tournament was star-packed at that time.
It was, and you really, popular opinion, just like at WrestleMania 4, I just knew Hogan was going to lead with his title. And at this one, I just knew Austin was going to lead with the title. I just knew it. It was just a question of how is he going to get there. But again, with they were so good at just going against the grain at this time.
Yeah. And see, the guys I used to watch with at this time, I remember one of them, he was like you. He was 100% convinced this was Austin getting the title back, that it had been off of Austin for too long, he's going to get the belt back. I had another friend that was convinced that no, Mankind's getting it, they're going to screw him over. Where I was the one saying it was The Rock that was going to get it, because there was so much being done to build The Rock leading into this as the new superstar. And granted, there was a lot of build around Mankind, and so, you know, when I think of that, you have Austin at his peak, still running, great storylines around Austin, great storytelling to build The Rock into the man, and great storytelling to build Mankind into a main event superstar. Have we ever in the history of wrestling seen talent development done so well through storytelling
No.
as it was here?
No.
This was probably the best talent development storytelling ever.
By far. I mean, that's why 98 is my favorite year in the business.
And so, yeah, we talk about, you know, so many stories, you know, woven together through this. I mean, it was complex creative writing, and potentially, in my opinion, the peak of complex creative writing in wrestling.
I agree, because, again, the best stories, it's not so much the action scenes, but it's what gets you to it. It's what gets you to that climactic fight scene. Mm-hmm. And during this era, there was so much compelling stuff, because think about like the three people that we've talked about. Austin is the champion who's had the championship wrongly taken away from him by the evil corporate Mr. McMahon, mm-hmm. and this could be his night of vindication. You've got The Rock, who is this up-and-coming guy who the people are rallying behind. This could be his coronation, mm-hmm. as like one of the next big stars. You got Mankind, who has, I mean, the dude was thrown off the Hell in a Cell in June, and it's like, he's never been a world champion. This could be his night. I mean, all three of these, there's a legitimate reason for them to be the champion, and there's a legitimate reason to be emotionally invested in them. And it's like...
And let's not forget the two guys who have opening round buys, Kane and The Undertaker,
right,
who have another legit cry that they should be going for the championship, because they had just wrestled in a match that was supposed to be the winner of this match was going to be the champion, and yet that match didn't get a finish. So, two more guys that had a belief that they could walk out as champion.
And Kane is a former world champion at this point. Remember, he had won the title in that First Blood match at King of the Ring 98.
Yeah, and Undertaker's already at legendary status at this point.
Yep.
So let's get into the tournament itself. So we start off the tournament with Mankind against a surprise opponent. And what's interesting is you watch this, you know, when you go back and you watch on the WWE Network, listen to the crowd as you're going into this match. There's a lot of portion of the crowd chanting HBK.
Yeah.
They thought Shawn Michaels was going to be the mystery opponent, not understanding that he was out with a back injury at this time.
And there was some thought that maybe, I mean, they were bringing him back to do some stuff at this time, and I think the fans maybe were just in denial that the injury was that serious, and there was just some hope.
Yeah, because he had came back, after WrestleMania 14 he disappeared. He came back a little bit in June, a little bit in July, a little bit in August, did some announcing stuff, but then he had been gone. He hadn't been around since August, and so the crowd, you know, chanting for him here. You know, when he came out and he was doing the announcer stuff, you could see he was still in good shape. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I remember watching this at the time, hoping it would be him. Again, you know, the internet back then wasn't what it is today. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we weren't aware that he wasn't able to participate.
Right. And, and again, the anticipation of it, but then for the way they did it, it makes you think, oh, maybe they are trying to set this up for Mankind.
Yeah. And so, yeah, because they set it up where Mankind's opponent is Dwayne Gill.
also known as Gilbert.
Right. So Mankind obviously goes on to win that one with an easy first round matchup. The next matchup in the first round is Al Snow versus Jeff Jarrett.
And I just remember a lot of the entendres with, Head and Deborah. Wow, Deborah. Let me move forward. But
And I'm just I'm not gonna say it, but if you haven't heard Bruce Pritchard do his Michael Hayes impersonation talking about Head,
yeah,
you have to listen to that. I'm wanting to laugh right now just thinking about it. So.
I am too. And I mean, do you think they could do that in 2018?
I don't think you could pull that off now unless it was an exclusive to the network show that you could do an Attitude Era or ECW style show. You definitely couldn't put that on cable television now.
So. No, you couldn't.
Yeah, so we see Al Snow go on to win this match. The next match, opening round, Austin versus the Big Boss Man. And Boss Man, who had returned to WWE during this time, and with the new look, brought him more into the Attitude Era, returns in, and Austin wins this match, but he wins it by disqualification, as Boss Man uses his nightstick to kind of really beat up Austin to make it hard for him to continue as the night goes on.
And as I was thinking about this, I was like, man, Big Boss Man has when you think about his run in the WWE and WCW, he's always been working with the top guys. I mean, how many guys can say that they beat both Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold, and they even got The Rock with a nightstick at one point? I mean, everybody caught that. It was like, the dude was a worker.
Yeah, and he was in the NWO for a while too.
He was, and he was like one of the first big men that could really move the way he could move. He was a rarity.
Yeah, he was in the NWO and the Corporation, so he was in two pivotal groups for each show. But so Austin wins the match, but by DQ, Bossman really softens him up. We see Mr. McMahon, talking about how that's a win for them because you think Austin's going to be able to go on. So, but we see that it doesn't go exactly the way Mr. McMahon thinks, because the next match with X-Pac and Regal, basically neither could continue after the match is over. It goes to a count. Neither could continue. It seemed like there was a little confusion. They wanted to go down and restart the match.
Yeah, I noticed that.
But then they didn't restart the match. X-Pac was walking away, so it almost felt like that they kind of jumped the gun on that. Like X-Pac was supposed to be counted out against Austin, but they wanted to start the match early. Yeah, that
was very confusing.
Yeah, I would like to know. I like to hear when something Russell covers it, what they say was supposed to hear. I would really hope Truth with Consequences covers this show. I'd like to hear from the man who wrote it himself what was going on, but yeah, definitely like to hear Russo's take on what was going there. But because neither X-Pac nor Regal could continue, Austin now has a round 2 bye, so he has more time to rest up.
Right, but can we jump back? Remember William Regal's theme music at this time?
Oh, the man's man?
He's a man. I mean, and I just listened to something in Russell's episode about William Regal, and I had no idea of the stuff that the guy's been through. And I mean, if you haven't heard that episode, I'm going to do a plug for something to Russell right now. You should listen to that episode, because the man's story is inspirational and what he's been through, and just some of the stuff that, he's a great worker. He wasn't at his best at this time, as they would admit, but obviously he's still around, and he's still a very vital part of the company.
Mm-hmm. And so your next matchup here is Shamrock versus Goldust, and Shamrock gets the win to advance on.
I actually really enjoyed this match, because I think this was just after, was Shamrock a heel? I think
not yet. So Shamrock at this point, he was still the face, but it was starting to lay the pieces down for him to join the corporation.
Right, and this actually ended up being a better match than I anticipated it would be because of, I mean, Goldust was a great worker at this point, and I mean, his character, I mean, I think this is when he had, like, his storyline, like, left Terry and stuff like that. So this was actually a very good match.
Yeah, and sometimes it's overlooked at how good of a worker Shamrock was.
Yeah.
He had the look, he had the believability, and he could pull off really good moves, especially for a guy of his size.
Yeah, and I heard it talked about, like, why didn't he ever get the world title? I mean, I don't know if it would have. I don't know if he would have, if it would have worked for him, but he was a good worker for the time that he was in WWF.
And was he the first TNA champion?
He may have been.
Yeah, I could be wrong about that, but if I'm not mistaken, I thought he was the first TNA champion.
Because I'm trying to even think of when did he actually leave WWF? Was it right in 2000?
Yeah, well, he went back to UFC for a little while. He got back involved in mixed martial arts, but then he did show up into TNA. So we go on from here. It's supposed to be advertised as The Rock vs. Triple H, but of course Triple H is still out with a knee injury at this time.
Right.
But they play it up to kind of set up the heat for him when he comes back with a corporation of, well, he got the phone call, he knew he was supposed to be here. And so since Triple H wasn't there, the corporation wasn't going to let The Rock move on because they're against the people's champion. And so the boss man steps into the ring to face him, but The Rock does a quick roll-up pin, and The Rock's advancing.
Which was kind of a surprise, which was weird because we had just seen Stone Cold wrestle the Boss Man in the first round, and it was like, so you're having this guy the Boss Man wrestle 2 first-round matches?
Yeah, and so I remember watching it live and thinking it was, you're sending your henchman out who just hurt Austin to hurt The Rock. But The Rock outsmarted him and rolled him up quick. And I remember my buddy who thought Austin was going to win this, like, going crazy at this moment because he was a Rock fan, even though he was thinking Austin was going to pull this off. Remember him going up, going crazy that The Rock was able to roll him up and pin him quick. But to me, it kind of makes sense from storyline. It's like, okay, the Boss Man is going to get out there, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to The Rock's going to advance, but he's going to get beaten with a nightstick leading up to advance, so he's going to be hurt.
Right.
And so Rock's advancing now, and of course Taker and Kane have the opening round bye.
Well deserved.
So now we move into the quarterfinals, and so we get to see Kane versus Taker, and Taker wins with help from Paul Bearer.
Which, I mean, and I use this, I'm going to say this very carefully. The matches between Kane and Taker, as time went on, would get better. I think that this was still early for them, so the chemistry wasn't there. I mean, it was still a good match, don't get me wrong, but I just know that I just knew that there was so much more out there for them because their best matches were when their feud was just like when I think about WrestleMania 20, when it was just geared for just them.
Yeah, and I think part of this as well was the multiple storylines going on, and because of how many matches you're having to squeeze in, they have to be a little bit shorter. And so I think that also kind of took away from two guys that work at a little bit of a slower pace.
Good point. And this was also right around the time that Taker and Paul Bearer had just gotten back together.
Yeah, and that was actually the next point I was going to make is you're continuing to add to the stories going forward as we're seeing Paul Bearer get back involved in this. And I mean, just again, that goes right back to Vince Russo's writing style of continue to move stories forward. So we see Mankind versus Al Snow here in round number 2, with Mankind advancing again. So kind of pushing forward the guy who looks to be the corporate favorite of the tournament.
Right, and you got Al Snow in the second round, which not trying to bury Al Snow at all. Don't hear what I'm not saying, but when you, like, at that time, if you're of the mindset that they're trying to set this up for Mankind,
and he's going against a member of the Job Squad.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, absolutely. Al Snow, a great mind in the business, a great worker, but yeah, to the storyline purpose, you had Dwayne Gill, round 1.
Job Squad.
Al Snow, Job Squad, round 2. So it's looking like they're trying to pave the path for Mankind.
Right.
So now we move on to The Rock versus Shamrock. And in this situation, the Big Boss Man tries to interfere. It appears he's trying to throw the nightstick to Shamrock, but it's intercepted by The Rock. Knocks Shamrock out, gets the pin.
And this Rock and Shamrock had worked together a lot in '98, and I think this may have been like the first time Rock had actually gotten like a pinfall victory, because all the other times I remember Rock tapping out.
Yeah. Or when you go to, was it Royal Rumble '98, The Rock had the brass knuckles.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, and so, yeah, in this situation again, it looks like the corporation coming down, sending Boss Man to screw over the People's Champ, but he outsmarts him, intercepts the nightstick, and lays out Shamrock.
Boss Man is all over this pay-per-view.
Yeah, he is. And so, and of course, Austin, to finish out the quarterfinals, has the bye due to the Regal X-Pac situation, and so we are moving into the final rounds of the tournament. So to get that set up, to give time for the athletes to rest up, we go into the women's championship match, and Sable regains the title against Jacqueline.
Or what? Yeah, I think this might have been even her first title win, because she had wrestled SummerSlam, where she teamed with Edge against Mark Mero and Jacqueline, and then she wins the title here. And think about it, of these two, Jacqueline and Sable, Jacqueline's the one in the Hall of Fame right now, as she should be, but why isn't Sable in there?
Yeah, and Sable, so she had the title. I can't remember exactly how she lost it. I'd have to go back and research that. And so, yeah, this was regaining it back. But this was another storyline that had taken its time, built out. Mark Merrow's involved in there. Jacqueline and Sable had a lot of heat and history. And what was interesting is Sable, who was not a wrestler, was truly the diva at the time. The look, the modeling things. When she hit the ring, it drew attention. People wanted to see her wrestle.
Yeah, I think people just wanted to see her, period.
Right. And so, they wanted to see her involved in matches. And if you look at, again, another plug for Something to Wrestle With, if you go back and listen to their episode of Sable, you can hear, like, the pay-per-views where she wrestled and the buy rates, they jump up. So there was definitely, she was an attraction in that category. So, yeah, here it was, again, using that attraction to put the title back around her.
Yeah, and it's just, thinking about how far, like, the women's championship has come, because this was, in this era, let's be real, it was there, but it wasn't like a central part of the show.
Right, yeah, and at this time, you had Jacqueline who could wrestle.
Yeah, she was bad.
Yeah, and then, but other than that, she truly was the only wrestler at this time. We know going forward, you'd get Leah added in.
Ivory
added in.
Trish and stuff like that.
Trish added in. And, then time would just keep going on of loading in. They would keep getting better and better to the point where you reach today of you have main event stars up and out the board.
Yeah, and for, like, just the show here, that was just here Monday night, for the women to be closing the show the way that they did, with an angle like they had. And Becky Lynch, I was texting Derek the other day, I'm like, she is so over.
She is, especially like to see her on SmackDown, her basically acknowledging she can't compete at Survivor Series, but when she comes, there was no doubt in her mind she would have beat Ronda Rousey, and the crowd's going crazy for her.
Yeah. I mean, if she's saying that she's the man, and I'm not gonna argue with her. I mean, I'm like going to send her a tweet with Aloe Black. I'm like, she should come to the song, come to the ring to I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man, because she's I mean, she was supposed to be the heel going into this feud with Charlotte, but she's got that stone cold, she's like white hot, right?
I was actually thinking that the other night, that she's getting exactly what Austin was. Austin was supposed to be the heel that the crowd was going crazy for, and it feels like Becky's at that point, she's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So we move on into the tournament here. We're back into the tournament, and we have Austin versus Mankind. So you have that anti-authority, the man who people are looking to regain the title, going against the corporate favorite Mankind. And you can see the corporation, Briscoe and Patterson are ringside, Slaughter's ringside, trying to kind of keep Austin from winning the match. Here comes Shane McMahon as the referee out there, but instead and gives Austin,
you're number one.
Yeah, gives Austin the Stone Cold salute with the double middle fingers. It's revealed that Shane is not against his father. He's been with his father this entire time, and they screw Austin over, keeping him from going to the tournament, and the corporate favorite Mankind advances.
Yeah, was Vince at ringside for this one? Because didn't they wheel him down and he was like miraculously healed, or was that later?
I think you're right. I think this is when he leaps up out of his chair.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like faith healed.
Yeah, and so, all signs are pointing to, okay, Austin's out of it, Mankind's taking this thing.
Yep.
So you move into the next match, The Rock versus Taker. Kane now interferes in this match, giving The Rock the win by DQ.
Yeah, and this was like, I can only count a handful of times where Rock and Taker actually had matches against each other, and this ending really kind of made sense. And looking back on this 20 years later, it's like, this is a way to keep The Rock in the tournament and to keep that Kane Undertaker storyline going. It's like, Kane says, I'm not winning the title, Taker, you damn sure ain't winning it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was definitely like we mentioned earlier, so it's just move the stories forward, and everything's going to weave in and out, but at the end, you're going to see the clear picture.
Yep.
And so we now move into, as before we're setting up the championship match, we move into the triple threat tag team title match. The New Age Outlaws defending the titles against D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry, and the Headbangers.
And before the match even starts, I just remember this shot of the crowd with the entire, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, D-Generation X proudly brings to you, it's WWF Tag Team Champions of the World. They had this banner with the entire thing on it. I was like, I hadn't seen it. I'm like, this is what the Attitude Era was about. Crowd interaction.
Yes. Yeah, and as we covered in our Attitude Era episode, the signs, the catchphrases, the crowd singing along, the Attitude Era had a completely different feel to it.
Yeah.
And the Attitude Era was so much about characters and story, less about the in-ring performance, just more characters and stories, and it just hooked you and you wanted to be involved.
And another, not as mentioned as often piece of Attitude Era, Jericho was mentioning this one. I was listening to an episode of his podcast, the music.
Yes.
Once the music hit,
you knew who it was.
You knew who it was. Once you heard do 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 do, it was like, oh, you didn't know? The crowd was in. And Jericho was mentioning in WCW one time, his music was basketball highlights number 12.
Yeah. And what's great is because, Jericho's spot on with that is because, now when I go back and I've been watching going back and watching these old Attitude Era Raws at night, sometimes as I'm starting to fall asleep or if I'm glancing at my phone for a minute and I'm not looking at the TV and somebody's song kicks, I immediately know who's coming out without even having to look up.
Exactly.
And we're talking 20 years later and I'm still knowing who that was. So the Outlaws retain the titles here and the New Age Outlaws were over.
Right. They were definitely over, and I forgot how much I actually enjoyed watching D'Lo Brown wrestle.
D'Lo Brown was a great worker, and kind of looking at D'Lo Brown was a great worker at the time. I forgot about the chemistry that him and Mark Henry had together.
Yeah, and Mark Henry was really, he hadn't become who he would ultimately become, but like they had a really great. They really worked well together, and the Headbangers. You can't sleep on them either.
Right, and then the Outlaws were just at another level of a tag team.
Yeah,
which makes me wonder when will we see the New Age Outlaws go into the Hall of Fame. But that's a different subject. But that's definitely a tag team worthy of going.
Oh, they're going in. It's just win.
So now we're back to the tournament to close the show. The Rock versus Mankind. You have the People's Champ against the corporate favorite. Mr. McMahon is down at ringside with Shane, who we now know they're together. As the match is going on, The Rock gives the people's eyebrow to Mr. McMahon, applies the same sharpshooter that involved in the famous screw job ending a year before, and McMahon calls for the bell.
Yep.
Now, we won't go into too much detail about that because we'll be covering it later on, but we're already starting to set up multiple phases of going forward with The Rock and Mankind and what this ending meant, involving a submission that he didn't really say, I quit.
Yep. And to harken back to 1997, everybody had to be thinking, okay, they did something like crazy in 97, what are they going to do this year? To harken back to that and first of all, we thought they had left Vince and Shane had left the arena.
Right.
Because Stone Cold had chased them out of there. But now Vince, we find out that they're actually here and they're ringside, and for Rock to raise that eyebrow and do that, it's like, you're kind of like, what's going on?
Yeah, and see, what's just funny is because, knowing that 97 was real, was the shoot, I wasn't expecting anything crazy in 98. I didn't think they would want to touch what happened in 97 at all. And for them to just play right into it was something I didn't see coming at all. Where I had predicted The Rock would win the tournament, I didn't see it happening that way.
Yeah, and I think that's great storytelling to not resist, it's like you did that last year, it's like to not touch it, I think it's like, let's go right there, because think about it, Brett is in the other company, and you got to this Mr. McMahon character by a screw job. Why not use another screw job to solidify your new corporate champion as a heel?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when the match is over, you kind of have that moment where McMahon and Mr. McMahon and Shane are acknowledging The Rock is the new champion. He's the corporate champion. Mankind showing his confusion. The Rock attacks him from behind. But we're also starting to foreshadow towards the future as Austin comes out.
Yeah. And, just the ending of this show was, you end with Austin. You still ended with Austin. Kind of like with the pay-per-views back in the day would end with Hogan posing. You still ended with Austin giving out stoners.
Yeah, and that was amazing because you just had a great pay-per-view, a great storytelling throughout the entire pay-per-view, ending on a note that you could have closed the pay-per-view just on the what the heck as they screwed over mankind, but yet you built stories forward in those final moments.
Which is brilliant because you always want to leave the people wanting more.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this did. It left you wanting more in multiple different areas across the board. So, we'll kind of cut that right there because we know here in a couple weeks we'll be coming back to you with Mike Tyson and DX, and then the week after that following up with Rock Bottom. So we'll go from the Monday Night Raw after Survivor Series 98 all the way up until the following pay-per-view of December of 1998, Rock Bottom, where the new corporate champion has his first pay-per-view title defense.
Right, and it's another pay-per-view that is like themed around because the previous In Your House right after Survivor Series was D-Generation X. This one is Rock Bottom with rock banners and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and so kind of thinking back, 20 years later, how did Survivor Series 98 hold up for you?
It holds up great to me because again you have the storytelling, and in 1998 we had no idea what The Rock would end up becoming. I mean, he's like just wow. I mean, you didn't know. If you asked him 20 years ago, if he told him 20 years from now you're going to be like the biggest star in Hollywood, you're going to be making movies, you're not going to be in the wrestling business, you're going to be like just the man, he might have raised people's eyebrow and told you get your Rudy Poo candy ass out of here talking this foolishness. But just to think about what he's become, and just to think about that night just being like being the night that gave him his first championship and really was a part of what set him on the road to become what he became. It holds up very well.
Yeah, and to me it was still entertaining 20 years later. It still held up well, and it's one of those things that if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I would recommend starting with the Raw after Judgment Day.
Yeah.
And leading up to it so you can get the full feel. You can definitely go back much further. You can go all the way back to SummerSlam and watch up to it. But this was an amazing pay-per-view that still 20 years later is just as good as it was that night live.
It is, and it just, again, I can't say talk about just the storytelling enough. I mean, I wanted to watch every match because I wanted to hear about catch up on all the storylines that I had missed out on with even Dustin, with Goldust and Terry and stuff like that, and just the whole Sable Jacqueline thing even, and triple threat tag match. I wanted to watch and catch up on all of those stories and hear some of the King's comments that I forgot about.
So, you talk about wanting to catch up on all those stories. When was the last time you can remember that you were that interested in that many stories in a single pay-per-view?
Oh, the fact that I had to do that right there lets you know. Maybe, I mean, what comes to mind right now is WrestleMania 18. But there weren't even that many interesting stories then, outside of the NWO.
Yeah, the NWO and Jericho, Triple H is all that comes to mind for me for WrestleMania 18. So to me, I'm thinking it's probably back somewhere in '99, and so this was just speaking to that era of there were so many storylines in every pay-per-view that meant something that you cared about, and so going back and watching this, and it's like, this is why the ratings were so high back then.
Yeah, because they were doing 6 ratings, and that's unheard. That was like they were like blowing the roof off. They had segments that were doing like 8 ratings.
Yeah, and so when you look at it and you're like, there was just so many things, and with a 3-hour show, it's like you could easily do that again. Have every character involved in a story to make, and have stories weave in and out to feel like real life.
Yeah.
And that was just so compelling. You weren't stuck to just the ring and a backstage interview segment. Every part of the arena was part of the show. Outside of the arena, like hotels and restaurants and stuff, were part of the show on Monday Night Raw. And so, granted the live crowd, had to turn and watch a screen during that, but still, it was so good for TV. It was great television writing, and so, yeah, I can't think of in recent time a time that I cared about so many storylines as I did.
And you just said something very key. They were writing for television.
Yes.
They were writing. That's something you hear Russo say a lot. He was writing for television. If you're writing for television, there is a specific arc that you're going to follow, and I feel like they're trying to get back to that because with some of the storylines they've been doing here lately, between Raw and SmackDown, I feel like SmackDown, it feels like everything has most angles on that show have a storyline. Or, at least the feuds make sense if nothing else.
So, where would you rank Survivor Series 98 out of your all-time Survivor Series?
Ooh, why did you ask me that? I'm going to put a pressure and say top 5.
Yeah, to me, it's going to rank up there. It's definitely going to be up there around the original. Only because that was, the first one was kind of unique. In terms of entertainment, it may be my favorite Survivor Series of all time. So, yeah, I will go as far to definitely say my top 3, and I'm potentially going to say number 1 only because from top to bottom of the show, I was completely hooked.
I could see that, and again, because my boy The Rock won his first title, it's one of those memorable moments in history. 1998, you had several first-time title winners, and pretty much all of them are Hall of Famers at this point. So, it's a very big moment. It's one of those Survivor Series that you're going to remember right up there with 97, but you're going to remember 98 for a different reason than you remember 97.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you haven't watched this, definitely go back and watch it. Watch the Raws leading up to it. Watch this as well, and watch the Raws leading after it, and up to watching Rock Bottom, the next pay-per-view. So that way, when we hit that at the start of December, you will be all catched up and know exactly what we're talking about. And we will see you. We hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving. We'll be back in a couple of weeks as we bring you another double night episode as we cover Mike Tyson and the original D-Generation X.
Peace.
So, are you ready?